What's going on, guys? My name's Diggy. Welcome back to my channel. Before I get into the video today, I just wanted to say really quick that make sure you're liking and subscribing on all the videos. It really helps me out and shows that you're supporting the channel and what we're doing here. A lot of NFL related content. I just put out my first mock draft, and I'm doing other stuff with Madden and stuff like that. So I just wanted to say that, get that out of the way really quick, and then we'll get into the video here. The reason for this video is I just kind of want to go over some of the NFL rumors that are kind of swirling around the league right now. Free agency is coming up. Franchise tags are kind of being announced slowly. I'm recording this on Monday, March the 2nd, I believe. So not quite into the whole free agency yet, but there are definitely rumors swirling about guys leaving their respective teams to join others and stuff like that. We also just wrapped up the draft combine, which happened from Thursday through Sunday. A lot of really good performances there. So we're going to kind of break down some of that stuff. I've got two articles here. I don't really know if I would consider them articles. I guess you could say the Sports Illustrated one on the Combine is more of an article, but Bleacher Report kind of has their own page, I guess you could say, on NFL rumors and keeping up to date with that kind of stuff. So I'm just kind of going to go through them, talk about them a little bit, give my opinions on everything to do with football, I guess. So yeah, we're going to take a look at some of these. I think I'm going to start out with the draft combine first, just because my latest video was related to the mock drafts and stuff like that. So I kind of want to go through some guys. They have this article out, risers and fallers from the draft combine. I personally don't put too much stock in the draft combine just because, the top guys don't work out in it. There's seemingly more and more injuries, for guys that participate in it. So it's kind of one of those things where I don't know if it's really that accurate of a test of how good of a football player someone is, but it's not really for me to decide. Obviously, some GMs, managers, owners, whatever, still value it quite a lot. So, in this case, we might as well take a look at it and see who performed really well and who didn't, I guess. So the first guy that we're taking a look at is Chase Claypool. Now, really quickly, I just want to say that I'm not going to go over every single player in here. There's, quite a few of them. So I just kind of want to highlight the guys who I thought performed really well when I wasn't really expecting it, and then kind of highlighting the guys who I thought underperformed. So one of the risers here, Chase Claypool. Now, I was super impressed with this guy. He's out of Notre Dame. As you can see here on his kind of bio or whatever. But he's advertised as kind of a big ball receiver. As they can say here, he added 10 pounds since the Senior Bowl, which was in January. So that's a good sign that he's really in the gym working hard and stuff like that. But I think everyone was a little surprised at how fast he was. He ran a 4.42, which is, seventh best among his position group, as you can see here. But, he's running against guys like Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, all those guys are blazing fast and stuff like that. And that's not necessarily his game. He's more of a deep threat, more of a fade corner end zone kind of threat, big body down in the red zone. So yeah, I think everyone was pleasantly surprised by how diverse his athletic profile was. And he really impressed me through the combine. I thought he looked great. I thought his frame was really solid. The weight where he was at 229 really fit him perfectly. Also, not to mention, he's got some strength on him with 19 bench press reps, which means that he'll probably be okay in terms of run blocking. So as much as people don't want to address it and stuff like that, those are some of the weaknesses of those top guys, like a Henry Ruggs, like a Jerry Jeudy and stuff like that. They're super explosive and dynamic and stuff like that, but they're not really a huge help when it comes to the run game. So those teams that like to run the ball, like Seattle, blah blah blah, it like the Colts. It's tough to imagine that those guys want to go play for a team like that where they're very run heavy, and you're competing with guys like DK Metcalf from last year's draft, who just seemed like a perfect fit in Seattle as a big body receiver who can help with the run game. And I think Chase Claypool falls in terms of that kind of umbrella of receiver and stuff like that. So I thought he had a great combine. Justin Jefferson here, I mean, we don't really have to talk about him a whole lot. Everyone knows that he's a fantastic slot receiver, really productive with Joe Burrow. That whole offense was fantastic. Jamar Chase came out and said that he's a first rounder, should go in like the top 10 or something like that. Best receiver in the class. I don't know about all that, but he's a very, very solid receiver, so we don't have to talk about him too much. I do, however, want to talk about Michael Pittman here because he's another one of those guys very similar to Chase Claypool. Big-bodied frame, 6'4", 223. Showed out a lot on his agility, as they're going to show you here. Yeah, so he ran a 6.96 in his 3-cone and a 4.14 in his 20-yard shuttle. I think, honestly, he's very similar to the Chase Claypool archetype of that kind of receiver, a physical receiver, but he has marvelous hands. There was something that came out where he had well over 100 targets this previous season with USC, and I think he only had 4 drops or something like that. So incredibly great catch radius as well as hands. Very efficient when you throw on the ball. Always great for a guy who's got the size to then back that up. So I thought that was great. Jalen Hurts, obviously want to talk about him. There were rumors swirling before the combine and all that stuff that he should be working out at other positions, which is not anything new in terms of, these dynamic quarterbacks getting judged for not having the greatest arm strength, not having the greatest accuracy, but super, super athletic. And, we saw that with Lamar Jackson, but obviously we take a look back at that now, and clearly that was the wrong decision for him to have worked out in another position. He's obviously a quarterback, and he's potentially the future of this game. So I like the way Jalen Hurts conducted himself on the field. He kind of said, I'm a quarterback. I'm only a quarterback. Obviously, he ran the fastest 40 time because he's freakishly athletic compared to the other guys. His on-the-field stuff will always probably be his hindrance in terms of getting a full profile on him. As his athleticism carries him in a lot of the games that he plays in. He's very good at escaping the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield. He did definitely get better as a thrower when he was at Oklahoma as opposed to when he was at Alabama with, just the quarterback carousel and all that stuff there. I think it made a lot of sense for him to transfer to Oklahoma, and he became a better passer. Obviously, they have a history with Baker and Kyler Murray that they can produce good enough quarterbacks, especially those dual threat guys. So I thought he had a pretty good combine. People were saying, going into it, he's probably a 3rd, 4th round quarterback. There are now rumors that he's, going to be a 2nd round guy. People were really impressed with the way that he was throwing the ball and his footwork. So maybe we see him in the 2nd round. I wouldn't be surprised if, a really good team who's got an established quarterback or something like that, maybe an older guy, takes a shot on a guy like Jalen Hurts. Maybe we're looking at the Buccaneers if they can't resolve their Jameis Winston issue, and then maybe they bring in a guy like Phillip Rivers, but they draft a guy like Jalen Hurts. They say Rivers takes the reign for the first year. If he's terrible, he's gone in a year, and Jalen Hurts can come up. And then if we notice over time that Jalen Hurts is kind of struggling in his role as a quarterback and stuff like that, maybe they look to go address it in next year's draft. Another guy I really wanted to talk about is Albert Okwuegbunam. Now, I know even the announcers have really struggled to say that name. Okwuegbunam, it's really not that difficult, but everyone absolutely butchers it and just calls him Albert O. That's not really important to his draft combine, but to be perfectly honest, people have been struggling to say Tua Tagovailoa and Albert Okwuegbunam. It's kind of important to know how to pronounce the names of these guys. They're about to be NFL players, and they kind of deserve the respect of someone pronouncing their name right. So it's just something that bothers me a little bit, but it's really not a big deal in the end of the day. But what is important, however, is that he has 4.49 speed, and that is very, very important because the new age of the NFL is obviously geared towards the quarterback and passing the football more and stuff like that. So it's great to have a dynamic two-way player like Albert O. I don't know if he's necessarily the best pass blocker. You can't really compare him to a George Kittle or a Rob Gronkowski, where their value is pretty much balanced in both the running game and in the passing game. But I think he compares really well to a guy like Noah Fant, who just came out last season and plays for the Broncos now. Very fast, very dynamic with the ball in his hands, but not necessarily the best guy to be throwing out there in the run game and expecting a big block from him like George Kittle and Gronk did so well. Honestly, with the projections that I've seen and stuff like that, there were a lot of other guys that were ahead of him in terms of where tight ends were going to go. Cole Kmet is one of the guys that comes to mind from Notre Dame, who, to be honest, didn't really inspire me too much at the Combine, but I really thought Albert O showed out and had a great Combine, so I think that'll help his draft stock. We're going to move on to Jonathan Taylor here because I think there's been a lot of talk about kind of the top 3 running backs. You could argue Edwards-Helaire from LSU's in there as well. But in terms of the top 3 running backs, I think, you would make the argument that it's Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, and DeAndre Swift. Jonathan Taylor's draft stock has kind of fallen a little bit, but I'd say after the Combine, he really impressed a lot of people. He's a bit bigger of a back and isn't necessarily as polished as the other 2 guys when it comes to running routes and catching the football out of the backfield and stuff like that. I would argue that both the other guys, JK and DeAndre, are better at that than he is, but I think he's by far the best running between the tackles running back, and that's kind of a staple of like Wisconsin football. Like when you think of Wisconsin football, it kind of makes more sense to be like between the tackles, Northeast. Like I get that J.K. Dobbins is from Ohio State and stuff like that, but just the Big Ten kind of breeds more power running than it does, the SEC and whatever you want to argue, ACC, sure. The Big Ten kind of, breeds that power back, colder weather and stuff like that. So I think he's more of a bell cow kind of guy, can give him 25, 30 carries in a game and he's not going to get gassed, can carry guys on his shoulders if he wants to. I mean, you can't argue with the stats. 6,000 yards in 3 seasons in Wisconsin. He was clearly the guy there for a bunch of years. I like the guys that come into the draft with a very solid college career where they were consistent throughout their entire time in college and stuff like that. And Jonathan Taylor is kind of the staple of consistency. Hasn't really faced too many injury problems when he was up there in Wisconsin. I know he had a bit of a scare at one point, but I think, just the numbers speak for themselves. 6,000 yards in 3 seasons, 2,000 yards per season, if you're good at math. It's just one of those things. He's been consistent. He ran a great 4.39, put up the bench press at 17 reps, good agility, good broad jump, all that stuff. I don't know how much stock I put into all of those, but he's clearly a very good athlete. And yeah, I think he can rise his stock a little bit, probably a second, maybe a 3rd round pick, but I think whatever team lands him, they've either got their new number 1 or a very, very good complementary piece. So I like Jonathan Taylor a lot. The next guy I want to talk about is 2 tackles, actually back-to-back on this list, and I'm really excited to talk about both of them because, man, oh man, were their combines fun to watch. Now, first and foremost, I want to talk about Tristan Wirfs here. Now, in my mock draft, I actually think I had him as my 2nd or 3rd tackle off the board. I think I had Jedrick Wills, and then I'm pretty sure I had Andrew Thomas, but it could have been Tristan Wirfs. I can't exactly remember which order I had them in. So according to my own mock draft, I actually have Tristan Wirfs going number 14 to the Bucks, and he's the 3rd tackle off the board behind guys like Jedrick Wills and Andrew Thomas. I still think, just based on the tape, Jedrick Wills is probably the best offensive line talent in this draft. Probably still the most athletic guy. He's a little short, but I think all in all, he's a very solid player. I think the issue now is with Andrew Thomas. Now, Andrew Thomas isn't the most athletic guy, and I think that's going to really hurt his draft stock in terms of this upcoming draft with, just the new age of offensive linemen in this game and the speed and stuff like that. It's just evolving into a very different kind of strategy with offensive linemen. They have to be a whole lot more athletic and stuff like that, and I just think that Andrew Thomas may slide because of just teams not being aware of how athletic he could be as well. And obviously the display put on by Tristan Wirfs and Mekhi Becton. Tristan Wirfs ran a 4.85, and he's a huge individual. And then obviously Mekhi Becton is an absolute monster. He's 6'7" and 364 pounds. And, he's so long and athletic. There was also a clip of Tristan Wirfs jumping out of a pool onto the deck at like over 300 pounds. So it's just ridiculous how athletic these big guys are. It's really exciting to see some really, really highly touted offensive line talent coming into this draft. Obviously, we've seen it with guys like Quentin Nelson coming out in recent years and stuff like that. He's he obviously plays guard, so he's a little bit more powerful than these guys, but just a lot of athletic kind of offensive lineman, and I think it's a new exciting wave that's coming to the NFL. So these top two guys, I mean, I had them going in the first round anyways. I had Tristan Wirfs to the Bucks. I had Mekhi Becton to the Dolphins. I think they're very much first round talents, and I think they're going to stay in that first round. And if anything, this just solidified that for them. So that's really exciting for them. On to the next player, Isaiah Simmons. Now, Isaiah Simmons is probably the player I'm most excited for in this draft. You know, you can make the argument that, you know, Chase Young is going to be the most exciting player to watch on the next level, but I don't really have any doubts in terms of Chase Young's talent and stuff like that. However, you could make the argument that Isaiah Simmons is just the most dynamic player in this draft. He's ridiculously athletic. He was genetically engineered to play football. You know, he can play receivers. He can guard tight ends. He can play the run. He can blitz. He can do everything. He can drop into coverage. Like, the guy is just a freak, and he ran a 4.39. He's ridiculous. He's outrunning receivers in the draft combine. You know, they do those comparisons with, you know, ex players that are now very prevalent in the NFL. They compare him kind of positionally. Isaiah Simmons was outrunning some of the best receivers in the game, like Julio Jones and all that stuff. He is a ridiculous athlete, 6'4", 240 pounds roughly, 238 here. You know, I think the reason why I'm most excited for him in the draft and stuff like that is I want to see him succeed so badly in the NFL. However, I do have my worries about getting to that next level and just the way he plays the game, putting too much strain on his body. I'd really be sad if he ended up getting hurt or something like that, and it just kind of derailed his career. But in terms of the combine, he was just masterful in terms of all of his athleticism. I like Isaiah Simmons a lot. I think he's going to be able to translate really well to the NFL game. And honestly, I think he's a top 5 pick. So we are on to the next guys, and I'm going to take kind of two back-to-back here, both from the secondary. Christian Fulton, who I do have going in the first round at some point, if I can find him here. He's going number 17 to the Cowboys. I still think that's a great fit, especially with all the rumors coming out now that Byron Jones is on his way out. But we will get to that once we get rid of the Bleacher Report kind of article over there. However, Christian Fulton here, I guess the only worry for him that they had, according to this article, was his 40 time, and that was never really something I was concerned about. I knew he had great breakaway speed at 4.46. However, where I do worry about him is just the big stage and all that stuff. Are the lights too bright for him? And I don't know if they are. He's definitely a first-round talent in my opinion. However, I do think other DBs are rising quickly. You know, you take a look at guys like Jeff Gladney from TCU is one of those guys who I think can rise really high in this draft. However, I'm pretty sure when we were talking about, or when I was watching the draft combine, one of the reporters, when Christian Fulton was doing his drills and running around and stuff like that, he was like, this guy's going to be a top 10 pick. So maybe other teams are higher on him than I am. I have him going at 17. I don't think that's an unreasonable place to have him going at. I think, honestly, if it comes down to it and stuff, he might even fall in the draft, in my opinion. But that remains to be seen. We'll have to wait for the draft and all that kind of stuff. But I do like Christian Fulton. I think he's a top round talent, and he ran a great 40 times. So good combine for him. On to Antoine Winfield Jr. now. He's not huge, and that's literally the first thing that they say. He's 5'9". He's not a big guy, but he's an absolute ball hawk, and they were talking about his 7 interceptions when he was running his 40 times and stuff like that. He's very much all over the field. Even 88 tackles for a guy that size is very impressive. However, you can't play this kind of game being 5'9" and that short. I mean, you're going up against guys like DK Metcalf, Julio Jones, Michael Thomas. These guys are just athletic freaks that are bigger than you, stronger than you. You know, I really like this guy. I think he can be a great player at some point. Maybe he needs a couple years of development, but the NFL is kind of famous for, you know, not really recognizing talent that needs just a little bit more time. You can see here that he was a medical redshirt in 2017 and 2018, so there are injury concerns already there. I think he's probably a second or third round player. Maybe according to this, they're saying he could be a first round guy. I don't think so. I think there are other better safeties and corners in the draft. including guys like Grant Delpit. You got Xavier McKinney, who also pulled up after his 40 time, which I wanted to talk about, but I haven't read this full article yet, so maybe they mentioned him at some point, but that was scary to see after his 40. So, I don't think he's a first round guy, but I think he's potentially early third, maybe sometime in the second if he's lucky. But 5'9" is very scary for me as a safety. Okay, so we're into the fallers now. Starting off with a guy named Jalen Reagor. Obviously, I have him going in my first round. If you watched my mock draft, I have him going number 24 to the Saints. The reason for that pick was just to add another dynamic to their offense. You've got Kamara out of the backfield. You've got Michael Thomas. You bring in a second receiver. You've already got Jared Cook there. I liked adding another receiver to the mix. However, I guess with the combine and stuff like that, I watched his 40 time. It really didn't impress me too much. He was very much middle pack with a 4.47. That seems really fast, but they were expecting, as you can see here, high 2s, low 3s, and that really didn't come through. There was a lot of buzz on his name, and, I'm just kind of going over what the article's saying here at this point, but it was just a lackluster overall performance, and I think people were really expecting more from him, especially with the depth at wide receiver in this draft class. It can be a huge issue for him if he didn't show up that well at the combine. Maybe he has a better pro day at TCU. Hopefully that's the case because I think he's a great player, but if a guy like that manages to fall maybe into the second, even third round, with how deep this wide receiver class is, a team's going to be very happy at the end of the day drafting Jalen Reagor where he is. I think he could be great value if you're saying that he's falling in this. Another guy I wanted to talk about was Jared Pinkney. Now, Jared Pinkney has been kind of mocked as close to or one of the top 2 or 3 tight ends. As I mentioned earlier, Cole Kmet's up there. Now you've got to add in Albert O into the mix, but Jared Pinkney to me looked awful at the combine. And as I said, I don't like putting too much stock into, the combine and stuff like that, but he looked slow. He didn't look like he had a lot of effort. He didn't look like he wanted to be there that much. As it says here, he had a interview with the Patriots that didn't go well. And that he has a bit of a loser's mentality. I think this guy is going to fly down the board. Based on what I saw, he just showed no interest, didn't run a very fast 40 time, 4.96, worst among tight ends, especially in a day and age where the game is evolving and you've got to have more speed, even if those positions are still used for blocking and whatever. You've kind of got to be good at both. And I completely went right off of him. I had him as one of my top 2 or 3 tight ends, and now I don't even know if I have him in the mix for top 5 or 6, and this is not a deep tight end class. So I thought even the backup LSU tight end had a better combine performance than him. This was a real shocker for me. I didn't like it at all, and yeah, it's tough to see because I thought he could have been potentially a first rounder if teams were really desperate, but more likely in the second and third round. Now I'm thinking closer to 4th or 5th. And then lastly, AJ Epineza. And this one is super interesting for me because you have to keep in mind that he's not a speed rushing edge rusher. Like, you could move him in a 3-4 and have him play your end position in a 3-4. You wouldn't have him at an outside linebacker position in a 3-4. In a 4-3, you could even have him as a rush D tackle. He's a big guy. He's great at using his hands. He would absolutely destroy guards and centers if that's where he was lined up. I don't know how powerful he is enough to beat double teams yet, but he's got the burst to get by them initially, and he's got the power when you want to line him up on the outside to just do that one-arm jab that he loves doing on offensive tackles before they've set up. However, AJ Epineza is a perfect example of why the draft combine just doesn't always translate for some guys. Honestly, I think in a couple years we'll be sitting here talking about how AJ Epineza is a great player and how his draft combine was pretty poor. It's very similar to some other dudes who have made it into the league, and you take a look at their combine and you're like, oof, they didn't look so good coming out of college, but obviously something translates. So I think AJ Epineza is a perfect example of a guy like that. He's not a speed rusher. That's why his 40 time wasn't ideal, but he's powerful as anything. And I think he's a mismatch in terms of where you line him up on the line. And I think, honestly, if you get him in a defense with defensive-minded coaches who like using dynamic players that can present mismatches, I think he will thrive in where he's going, and I have him 22 to the Bills right now, so I think that would be a great pickup for them. That is the end of the combine. I've kind of given my opinions on some of the guys who really performed well and then performed poorly. According to this article by Kevin Hansen from Sports Illustrated, obviously this is probably not the opinions of everyone, but some of these names I've seen, pretty consistently. AJ Epinez has been popping up with, draft busts and stuff like that. So I just kind of want to clear the air, give my opinion on all of that. Now we're going to get into NFL rumors here with the Bleacher Report article or just homepage for NFL. First and foremost, I just want to say really quick, I wanted to thank everyone for showing a little bit of support for my mock draft. I'm a very new and young channel still. So anytime I get over 100 views or 200 views, it's very exciting for me. So I appreciate everyone who liked it and subscribed and commented and stuff like that. That was really awesome. So it's exciting. I do want to keep making videos like this and putting out content like this. I love doing it. It's kind of a passion project for me. I'm enthralled with the game of football and the NFL. So this is a lot of fun. So thank you for watching if you are. But we're going to get into this article here from Bleacher Report. NFL rumors just kind of circulating around the game right now. Steelers expected to franchise tag Bud Dupree. I think that's a great move for them. I'm pretty sure he's 28, so he's getting up there in terms of age. So I think it gives them a lot of, just kind of flexibility with what they want to end up doing. I don't know. I doubt they're going to be looking to shop him when it comes time for the draft and stuff like that. I think this is definitely more of a prove-it one-year franchise tag. If he has a great season next season, they'll probably extend him through a couple more seasons. But if he can't manage the same production he had this year, then he'll probably be on his way out. I kind of want to pick and choose again, very similar to the combine stuff. Pick and choose what articles I want to talk about here. NFL GM quotes that Lions think they will trade out of 3. I think that's pretty much a great idea for them. I think genuinely the Cincinnati Bengals are going Joe Burrow. They wanted to put they're going to put the franchise tag on AJ Green because Burrow told them to. So Burrow's already calling the shots in Cincinnati. Don't get it twisted. He's going number 1 overall. Number 2, there's been more reports about the Redskins taking a quarterback. Now, I think that's a great idea personally. I think you have a guy like Ron Rivera coming in, kind of move out from the old management and stuff like that, move off of Dwayne Haskins. Some people are saying that at the end of the season, Dwayne Haskins was showing something. I personally don't think so. He had like 7 picks and 7 touchdowns over his so many games. Even in their 2 wins, he went 2-5 as a starter. In their 2 wins with him, he had no touchdowns and an interception. So it clearly wasn't him providing those wins. You just didn't see that like, wow, that's a franchise quarterback right there. There just wasn't that moment, and it's pretty easy to tell. Like, you don't really need a lot of time, a la Josh Rosen for the Cardinals last year. He played enough games with them, and they were like, this guy just doesn't have it. So we're going to change course, draft another early quarterback. And I think as of right now, we as Cardinal fans are pretty happy with the fact that we have Kyler Murray instead of Josh Rosen. So I think, honestly, if you're the Redskins here at number 2, I think you consider taking Tua. I think you look at him on his pro day and you see if his medicals are clear. And then I don't think it's a bad idea to take him at number 2. Obviously, you want him behind a good offensive line, so Trent Williams becomes a question. But Chase Young's also there. Don't get me wrong. He's probably the best player in the draft. It's just one of those things. Maybe you even look down to trade from number 2. Maybe you trade with a team like the Giants or something like that who desperately need an edge rusher and are looking for Chase Young. Maybe you get a haul from them, and then you put the Lions in a predicament like, okay, do we take Tua now? Do we trade back again? I think this is going to be a very fun draft. I think there could be a lot of trades. So especially with some of those early picks. Yeah, I think this isn't something that surprises me all that much. I think the Lions will potentially trade out of number 3 if they're presented with an opportunity to take someone other than a Tua or a Chase Young or something like that. If they don't have the player that they want for sure at number 3, I think it's a great idea for them to just trade out of there, get a haul back, let a team trade up for their quarterback, whatever, or corner, whatever it might be, I think they could get a huge haul for number 3. So I think this is something that they desperately need to consider. Just moving on here, Jacksonville wants to trade Nick Foles. Of course they do. That's not a surprise. Nick Foles carries one of the biggest cap hits in the NFL, and he's also coming off a collarbone injury that he suffered in the first game as a Jacksonville Jaguar, not to mention the emergence of Gardner Minshew and stuff like that. So that doesn't surprise me. I don't think any team will take on that cap salary unless they get it paired up with at least a first round pick, maybe even 2, just to say like, hey, take this salary. We'll also give you these prospective picks. Which is tough for the Jags because they're never really in the mix. So a valuable first-round pick for them could go a long way. They do have a couple in this draft after trading Jalen Ramsey, so maybe they package him on draft night. You never know. I do want to get into this Byron Jones story. Now, they're saying that the Eagles, Broncos, and Lions are all options for Byron Jones. All the reports are leaning towards him leaving. You know, Dak is looking to sign a very short-term deal for a lot of money. And, if he proves it again to the Cowboys that he's a franchise quarterback, then they'll extend him long term. They've already extended Jalen Smith. They've already extended Zeke. They're looking to sign Amari Cooper long term. Byron Jones, unfortunately, just kind of gets left out of the mix here. And I don't blame him for wanting to pursue free agency, wanting to see what's out there for him. I think the Eagles are a great fit for him. They desperately need corner help. I also like the Lions a lot. Broncos kind of makes sense. Chris Harris is getting up there in age and stuff like that. And, they've got Justin Simmons back there at their safety position. That could be a very dangerous duo for a long time, these two together. But I think, honestly, the Eagles or the Lions are probably the two that are most likely to land him. Now, the question is, are the Lions willing to spend on a guy like Byron Jones? It's a tough call to make. I think the Eagles are really thirsty to get good players in as soon as possible because they know how tight that Super Bowl window can be. They've been a consistent playoff team. They obviously won a Super Bowl a couple of years back. So I think it makes a lot of sense for them to just pursue him as hard as possible, make him priority number 1, maybe look for wide receiver in the draft. I also wanted to discuss the Jags franchise taking Yannick Ngakoue. Now, Yannick Ngakoue made a tweet saying the Jaguars are aware of the fact that I don't want to play in Duval anymore. Which is, it's not surprising. I don't blame him for not wanting to play in Jacksonville. They are a terrible, terrible team, and notoriously bad. I think they're honestly one of the teams that could get moved in terms of like relocation very, very shortly, either overseas to the UK or coming up here even to Canada. Regardless, Yannick Ngakoue wants out. Now, they're going to franchise tag him in all likelihood. However, this to me clearly says that they're going to franchise tag him and then try and trade him on draft night. I highly doubt that they go into the season with Yannick Ngakoue. I think if the Jags are smart, they franchise tag him and then they go right to the Giants and they say, hey, Giants, we either want number 4 and we'll give you more with Ngakoue, or, they try and look for a teams that's, top 15, maybe top 20, who desperately need an edge rusher. But I think, honestly, if you're the Jags sitting there with Yannick Ngakoue, who doesn't want to come back to your team, you franchise tag him and you try and trade him on draft night. You look at a team like the Giants, who just missed out on Chase Young in all likelihood. They're sad about that. They get their consolation prize in Ngakoue. I think it's the right move. And I think you can get a pretty decent haul for a guy like him. He's been very, very good. One of PFF's best rated edge rushers for the past couple of years. The dude's a beast. So I don't blame him for wanting to leave Jacksonville. And I think if the Jags are smart here, they can get an absolute haul for him, revamp this entire team, change the culture again. It's tough to see, but, it's kind of a reality at this point. Report about Jameis leaving the Bucs. It doesn't surprise me. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucs tried to pursue, a Phillip Rivers type or something like that, maybe even a Teddy Bridgewater. The report came out the other day that Jameis was playing with a torn meniscus as well as, I believe, a hurt shoulder, and he got laser eye surgery. Maybe the guy comes back and he's an absolute monster. But, I don't blame the Bucs not really wanting to, give him that long-term deal. And the franchise tag for a quarterback would be immense. So you're kind of handcuffing yourself. I don't blame them if they want to, let him walk and potentially move up for a quarterback in this draft, or maybe they just get Phillip Rivers in for 1 year. Maybe he's trash and they get a high pick next year. Then you're looking at guys like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence from Clemson and stuff like that. So I don't think it's a bad decision to let him walk. I definitely wouldn't sign him to a long-term deal. I think that's a smart call on their behalf. This is just Ngakoue not wanting to stay. It's not super surprising. The whole CBA I don't really want to touch on. It's not really something that interests me to look up into that much. I know the top guys who get paid a bunch of money don't like it. I know the guys who don't get paid as much probably do like it a lot. I don't really have any input on it. I hope there's no strike. I hope there's just football for the next 10 years and we don't have to worry about it and all that stuff. Obviously, I want everyone to be happy and get money and be paid and all that stuff. Anything else here? Bengals to tang AJ Green. This came out the other day saying that Joe Burrow had his input and said, if I'm going to come to the Bengals, I want AJ Green to be there. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just a report that's out there. I think, honestly, it's not a bad move for them. I think if they tag him, he's there for another year. At that point, he's going to be 32, 33. Maybe you get another receiver in this draft. Maybe you get a receiver next draft. I don't think it's a good idea to let him walk right away. He's obviously been very disgruntled in Cincinnati, and quite honestly, I don't blame him at all. It's another one of those franchises where it's just, they've been kind of okay, but not really doing anything significant. But now you get a guy like Joe Burrow in there. Maybe that turns your team around and your franchise around. And I think it's honestly smart for AJ Green to want to come back to the Bengals on a 1-year deal. At least this way, you're on the franchise tag. You're making a good amount of money. You're playing with this very up-and-coming, exciting quarterback. If he's trash, you leave next offseason. If he's great, then, there's implications down the road of maybe getting you another contract if you perform really well. So I don't think this is a bad idea for AJ Green to be happy with that. Redskins wanting to draft Tua. I've already kind of touched on that. Jack Conklin is not expected to sign with the Jets, and that's actually got huge implications. So literally right underneath it says, report, Titans Jack Conklin might be signing with the Jets. Right above it says Jack Conklin not expected to sign with the Jets. So despite prior reports. So this is one that I don't even know if I mentioned it in my mock draft. I think I might have, but I have the Jets taking CeeDee Lamb in the draft, which is, if you haven't seen his catch from that new fade drill in the combine, it was amazing. So go check that out. But I actually have them at 11 taking CeeDee Lamb, and the reason for that is because Robbie Anderson's in all likelihood out of town. And they desperately need offensive line. I get it. But I figured they'd probably go after a guy like Jack Conklin. Now, this does change slightly what I think will happen in the draft. I have guys like Tristan Wirfs and Mekhi Becton going after that pick at 11. So, with their great combine and them not being able to land Jack Conklin, there's a chance that the Jets find the offensive line need is more important than the receiver need. I just thought this was very funny because Jack Conklin report comes out like, oh, perfect landing spot for Jack Conklin is the Jets. They need offensive line help. And then almost immediately it's like, not expected to sign with the Jets despite prior reports. It's a guessing game at this point. Obviously, free agency hasn't begun yet, so there's still a very good chance that he could sign with the Jets or not sign with the Jets. But I think it would be a great move for the Jets. I think that they should definitely try and actively pursue him. I don't know if Tennessee can even afford it. They definitely need to bring back a guy like Ryan Tannehill, in my opinion. They also definitely need to bring back Derrick Henry. So maybe Jack Conklin's the guy who just doesn't get the money that he wants. So I don't know if this is him saying that he's not going to go to the Jets or his agents or who else, but I just think it would be a smart call for him and for the Jets to have a mutual agreement there. I think that would be a smart call, but maybe not. Anything else I want to touch on here? Not really anything too important and stuff like that. I just saw a report that the Bucs, I think, might want to try and pursue Austin Eckler in free agency. I don't think that's a bad idea. I think especially if they're potentially looking for a running back in the draft as well. That's a fun tandem. You obviously still have Ronald Jones there. I just haven't seen enough from Ronald Jones yet. He's very, very young. I think he's only like 21 or 22 or something like that. So he's still very young. But I would still consider definitely drafting a running back for the Bucks. I wouldn't say first round. I think you can get still a very solid running back in the second round. It's something to talk about. Obviously, as well, the Panthers came out saying that Cam Newton is still going to be the quarterback of their future. It's all dependent on if Cam's body can hold up. He plays a very specific way. I don't know if he'll ever stop running around, and that's the way Cam Newton plays football. Obviously, it's very fun to watch, and he had that MVP season and stuff like that. That was great. But, you kind of get into those guys who run, but run recklessly as opposed to like a Russell Wilson. Like Russell Wilson moves and runs, but he doesn't run recklessly. Cam runs, but runs recklessly. Runs like a running back, runs like a receiver. It's different. It's different in the NFL level. You get hit way harder. Your body breaks down faster. I was just looking at a report the other day about running backs where the prime of running backs in comparison to all other positions is significantly lower, and it's around 24 years old. So any of you fantasy football players, look for those 24-year-old running backs for this upcoming fantasy football year. But it's smart for them. They don't have to address the quarterback position right now. I think, honestly, if you're in a situation where Cam gets hurt again next year, or even maybe if he's not up to form and not playing well, then you kind of clean house. You can trade him at the trade deadline potentially to a team who might need a backup, or just, maybe thinks Cam can still do it on an offensive team, at an NFL level. But yeah, it's tough to see. I don't blame them for wanting to just kind of have him around for, another season. There's not really any harm in that. I think, however, that's going to be it for me. I haven't really talked about Tom Brady. Joe Schobert's actually another guy who I'm super interested to see where he goes. There were rumors to him being linked to the Broncos today, I think I saw. Obviously, the Brady situation. My personal opinion on the whole Brady situation is I don't think he's going to leave. He's old as can be. He doesn't want to move. He doesn't want to go learn a new playbook, a new offensive culture, meet all these new players and all that stuff. Like, to me, it just doesn't seem like the right decision for him. Definitely don't see the Giants pursuing him. I don't even see the Colts pursuing him. To be honest, I think, honestly, if there's one team that's going to go after him, it's probably going to be the Bucs or the Chargers, just because they don't have, a great history of quarterback play. You could argue that Phillip Rivers is a Hall of Famer. I don't think anyone would disagree with you just based purely on the numbers, but he doesn't have any Super Bowls and whatever. But I don't think Brady's going to go to a place with a very well-established history of quarterback play. You've got Andrew Luck for the Colts. You've got Peyton Manning for the Colts. You've got Eli for the Giants and stuff like that. Like, just to go to those stadiums every day and, not really feel like you're the most influential quarterback in the franchise's history. I think he stays in Foxborough. I think this is all blown out of proportion. I think Brady's just a little disgruntled with the front office and not having enough help in terms of offensive weapons and all that stuff. The defense is getting very expensive and older. I think, honestly, this is his last season. I didn't like what I saw last year in terms of his mobility and all that stuff, but that's not really for me to decide. I think it'll be interesting to see what he does, but I think ultimately he stays in Foxborough. So that's going to be it for me. I really appreciate you guys checking this out. Kind of just going over the draft, combine, and, just swirling NFL rumors, kind of clear the smoke a little bit, see what's out there and blah, blah, blah. Just something I've wanted to talk about for a while now. I'm obviously very excited for the draft coming up and free agency. I'm very curious about all the moves that are going to be made. So, we've already had guys cut and teams freeing up cap space and all that stuff. So it's going to be very exciting. I'm going to keep posting more videos like this, as well as trying to keep up with Madden content as well. But if you guys like this video, make sure you like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Yeah, let me know in the comments where you think anyone's going to go for the draft or free agency, where the right fits are, whatever it is. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.